Now that's what I call a feast. I'm not talking about Thanksgiving dinner, and that's over, all right? Week 13, if you're a football fan, it was full of everything you could possibly want. We had a ton of games Thursday and Friday, and then a full slate. No teams were off, a ton of scoring, a lot of interesting things developing here. But of course, we got some new names popping up here. Let's figure out who do you want to pick up on the waiver wire? Who will you need to pivot from? Because, of course, there are some injuries. And, by the way, it's almost playoff time. So buckle up. And as we move towards week 14 and get toward the end of the football season, sadly, look, we have a goal that we set out to make 100,000 subscribers by the end of this season. It's still in sight. Help us get there. If you're watching this channel and you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please take a second and do so. Let's start by running down the big injuries from this past week. And the first one was in the first game on Thanksgiving Day, of course. Didn't expect that you would be treated to a 0 from Amon-Ra St. Brown, likely your best player in your team. That's what happened. He left early, so I got rolled up on from behind. And so this is a low ankle sprain, which is better than the high ankle variety. But Dan Campbell said this seems like it's a 1 to 2 week kind of injury. And that doesn't mean he's automatically ruled out for this week yet. We have to see what happens. Sometimes players can play through these things and, recover quicker. But you also can't assume that you're going to have Sun God this coming week. So I do have a player in mind. I mean, Jameson Williams is pretty much owned everywhere. If you've got him now, you've got to feel actually fairly confident about him. But there's maybe a deeper name that you could consider. And toward the very end of the late slate, on Sunday, I mean, this was kind of surprising. Justin Herbert, we saw that he left briefly, came back in. There was some sort of issue with his non-throwing hand. Well, then after the game was over, a game in which Herbert did come back in and finish and lead his team to victory and seemed okay. And then we're hearing that he's got a fracture in his left hand, similar to what Aaron Rodgers suffered last week. Now, Jim Harbaugh, who's notorious for being extremely unhelpful when it comes to news and injury updates, he said basically he's unsure if he'll miss time, which is reasonable, right? This just happened. Of course, we don't know yet exactly the extent of this. So again, remember, Rodgers did miss 1 week and then came back. Herbert, again, this week, his status is going to be up in the air. And if he's out, it's going to be Trey Lance. And then just when Marvin Harrison Jr. came back, remember, he missed a couple of weeks because of appendicitis. So a completely unrelated injury. He had a heel issue that caused him to leave the game and not return. He was pretty good when he was out there, 6 catches, 69 yards, and he definitely basically took over that number 1 role, rendered Michael Wilson back to being pretty much useless in fantasy. But I mean, hey, look, if Harrison is going to miss now because of this injury, maybe Wilson does still have some hope. Now, Aaron Jones had missed time earlier in the season due to an AC joint sprain in the shoulder. Well, guess what? He landed awkwardly on that shoulder, that same one again. And so this is definitely cause for concern. Kevin O'Connell, the head coach there, said that he will need further evaluation. Okay, that's pretty vague, but of course he will get evaluated just like all injured players do. But the fact that it's that same shoulder and Jones being kind of an aging running back, this can't be good. I mean, there's really nothing good in Minnesota these days. If you saw that game, I mean, even before this happened, Aaron Jones, 6 carries for 3 yards. And so, look, for what it's worth, if Aaron Jones misses time, I mean, they're going to have to try to run the ball. And Jordan Mason did show a little bit of burst. And if he gets all the touches, maybe he was dropped in some of your leagues. He could have some value, but just don't count on any touchdowns. And rookie running back for the Browns, Dylan Sampson. Don't worry, not Judkins, but Dylan Sampson, just when he started to get a little bit more involved in the offense, he left with a calf issue. He did have 4 carries early in the game before leaving. He can be cut, though. I mean, it's not like his fantasy value was that significant. And then Jacksonville, so many weapons they got back now. You don't know who to start. Well, you may not have Parker Washington. He had a hip injury, caused him to leave early in week 13. All right, let's figure out who to pick up or who to stash. Keep in mind, this point of the season, it's not just about the here and the now and who could have value for the coming week. You got to think postseason. You've got to think who's going to help me get to and get through the playoffs. So a couple of these are actually going to be stashes, but you've got to get them now. And let's start with one of the best quarterbacks in the game, really. Jaden Daniels last year finished as the QB5 in fantasy. And this year he got off to a little bit slower of a start. Understandably, Terry McLaurin, of course, missing time. And this team just hasn't looked the same. Let's face it, right? No running game. But he was still the QB11 in fantasy points per game before he got injured, and we know what he can do with his legs. So look, Jaden Daniels has been out. We thought that might be a season ender based on the way you saw how that arm bent. That was very unnatural. But look, Jaden Daniels was not ruled out for the season. I get it if he was dropped. You didn't want to wait in the stash and a what if. But look, he may actually have a shot to come back in week 14. And even if he doesn't, it's almost sure. I mean, this is just my opinion, but it seems like he's on the verge of coming back. It might be the following week, and that's when your fantasy playoffs start. Why not just pick up the guy who is one of the top fantasy quarterbacks and put him in your lineup? If you did this with Joe Burrow, you're pretty happy. You don't have to even think about the QB position anymore. Same thing with Jaden Daniels. I'm kind of shocked to see in Yahoo leagues, 68% rostered. That means in a third of all leagues, he's just out there on the waiver wire. It doesn't matter how deep your league is, he can help your team. And likewise at receiver, let's talk about a pair of bucks. It's been a while since we've seen Mike Evans. We've barely seen him at all this season. And what we saw in the first couple of games didn't seem like vintage Mike Evans. But whatever, that's a very small sample. He is still Mike Evans. This Bucs offense needs Mike Evans, and Mike Evans could come back this week. Again, this is very iffy because we get very little in terms of specifics. Todd Bowles just said, we'll have to see what he does in practice. This is what he always says, right? I mean, sure, there's a shot, right? We kept waiting and waiting on Bucky Irving. He came back, he made an impact. If Mike Evans gets out there, he's going to make an impact. And so don't assume you'll have him for week 14, but why not stash him now and get him ahead of week 15? This is a guy you can absolutely just plug right into your lineup. It's Mike Evans. And his teammate has been out there. Chris Godwin's been playing the last couple of weeks, but you wouldn't really know it based on, the point totals here. Has not done anything. We've been saying, look, it's too soon. It's too soon. You can't start Chris Godwin until he starts to look at least closer to 100%. And so finally, he looked a little closer to that in week 13. Not a huge game by any means, only 3 catches, but 78 yards. He was actually getting some shots down the field. And look, Baker Mayfield is clearly not 100% himself, right? This whole offense has been so banged up, but they're starting to get those pieces back. Bucky Irving, like I said, is back. Baker is at least good to go. Godwin now every week is going to get a little bit stronger, right? Knock that rust off. And so now we've seen that he's going to make an impact. I think Chris Godwin, it is a time that, at the very least, if you don't want to start him, I get it, you can wait, but why not stash him? I mean, if Mike Evans comes back, that doesn't hurt. This just helps this entire offense. You got all those weapons back. We're healing Jalen McMillan, the young receiver, might be on his way back sometime this season. You want a piece of a high-powered offense, and Tampa Bay is that. And for what it's worth, I mean, this is just a minor, part of the considerations you have when you're setting lineups and thinking about postseason. But in December, we get all the cold weather games, the bad weather games, the snow and all this. You don't have to worry about that with Tampa. Their next 2 games are at home in Tampa, and then their 2 road games are in Carolina and Miami. There will be no snow here, so this is just a little thing that makes me really want to be in on this whole Tampa offense. I said it a couple of weeks ago, buy Bucks, right? Buy into this offense while you could buy low on all of these guys or just pluck them off the waivers for free. Now, speaking of Carolina, so they had themselves quite a week. I mean, beating the Rams, that's a shocker. But hey, this Carolina team does that. Every once in a while, they just show up and they look like a juggernaut before reverting back to mediocrity. But the interesting thing in this game is not just that they won and they put up points, but all of a sudden we might have a shift or at least a return to the backfield that was led by Chuba Hubbard. So Rico Dowdle, was certainly involved, right? He had 18 carries, but Chuba Hubbard had 17. This was a near even split. And on those almost equal amount of carries, Chuba Hubbard was just better. He averaged 4.9 yards per carry, 83 yards, and he took that screen pass to the house. And so this is the first time I can say I've seen where Chuba actually looked explosive. And so likewise, they each caught 2 passes. So again, almost identical usage here, but Chuba Hubbard is the only one out there on 3rd downs. He is the passing down back. He's been doing that, right? He's had that role lately, and he's just been a floor play because he'll catch a few passes, do just minimal groundwork. But now all of a sudden, he was better as a runner, and he was just as involved as a runner. So all of a sudden, Chuba Hubbard looks like more than just a handcuff. Now, the downside to this is, Carolina is off. Week 14, they're one of those teams that have that final bye week. So he won't do anything for you, but as I mentioned on that RB handcuff video a couple of weeks ago, he is one of those players that if he gets the majority of the touches in this offense, of course, he has a ton of value. And you know what? Now all of a sudden it looks like he doesn't even need a Rico injury. And then the same thing here, I actually can't believe I still have to mention Kyle Monangai. How is he not rostered in almost every league? I mean, look, I get it. There's some shallow leagues here. Maybe he just doesn't make the cut, but his ownership rate here looks way too low. And I'd be shocked if it doesn't skyrocket after what we just saw against Philly. That Philadelphia Eagle defense on the road, the Bears just pounded them to submission with both DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. So again, this is a timeshare, but both guys have been effective, and Monangai is the one who, despite Swift scoring also, still gets more of the goal line work. I mean, he's scoring almost on a weekly basis here. Just came off a 130-yard game, 22 carries. And so this is just something that's a continuation of what we've been seeing, double-digit carries in 4 of the last 5. So whether you think he's the 1A, the 1B, or if it's even, it doesn't matter. The Bears are running the ball so well. This is exactly what we thought could happen in the Ben Johnson offense. This 1-2 punch, right? Kind of like in Detroit, we had Gibbs and Monty. And I mean, that's basically what we're seeing. So if you like David Montgomery last year, you should like Kyle Monangai this year, and he should be on your roster if he's not. And another repeat, because I have to say, until Christian Watson's ownership rate goes up high enough, again, barely half owned in Yahoo. What is the deal? He's the #1 receiver, undisputably, I think you could say, in Green Bay. A really good team, maybe not known to be a high-powered passing offense, but they are going to pass the ball, and as times as you've seen just this past week on Thanksgiving, they can do it pretty effectively when they need to. But Watson, again, he's become by far the leading target getter since he's returned from injury. I mean, this past week, yeah, he had that touchdown. You're like, okay, that was a good highlight reel-worthy play, but 10 targets. Now, he didn't catch all of them, but it's okay. When a guy gets that many targets, he absolutely has fancy value in every PPR format. So again, I'm just shocked that Christian Watson isn't pretty much owned everywhere at this point. And then one more repeat. I mean, Jacoby Myers, part of an offense that all of a sudden just keeps looking better and better, getting not just more pieces back, but just coming together as a unit. They become solid. They're not one of these teams that puts up 30, 40 points on a weekly basis, but they always have production from their guys. And Jacoby Myers now is one of their guys. I mean, let's face it, I think at this point we can say he's the #1 receiver there. Brian Thomas Jr. came back in week 13, minimal impact. Parker Washington has been good. Remember, Parker Washington left with a hip injury. We'll see what his status is. And look, Jacoby Myers now has become more than just a floor play. Back-to-back games with a touchdown. He finally had a big play, right? A 50-yard catch in that game. And that's not what you think of with Jacoby Myers, but that's what we're starting to see in Jacksonville as he develops chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. And so again, despite all those other options there in that offense, in week 13, it was Jacoby Myers led the team in targets, in receptions, in yards. He's kind of doing it all. So you don't think ceiling when you think Jacoby Myers, but maybe now we have to at least raise our expectations a bit. And again, looking ahead, because we're thinking playoffs, not a bad schedule at all for the Jags, but especially against wide receivers. So they're going to get the Colts in 2 of the next 4 weeks. And the Colts, of course, are a very good team, but a good offense that's going to force the Jags probably to pass plenty and try to keep pace with them. And the Colts are bottom 10 against wide receivers in terms of fantasy. They also get the Jets during the next 4-week span. There's only one tough matchup, which is the Broncos. And even then, you figure at least Will Myers could give you a floor. All right, now let's get deeper. These are some players that probably will be first-time adds on the waiver wire, at least in a lot of leagues. Starting New Orleans, so kind of out of necessity here with Kamara being injured, you know, with the trades they made, Shaheed gone, just they need something here. So last week, I actually specifically mentioned on the waiver wire video here that I wasn't going to mention Devin Neal as a recommended add. Sure, he's the lead back there, he's the RB1. But this was not a good spot for him. I know it sounded like it was against Miami. It wasn't a good matchup. Just wasn't enough here. I didn't feel like he was going to be worth putting in your lineup. And if you did start Devin Neal in week 13, you didn't get double-digit fantasy points, right? He just did a little, but not enough that you really wish you would have started him. But now I'm going to tell you, okay, if Devin Neal is still out there, or maybe he gets dropped by somebody who was disappointed by what they just got, you can pick him up. Alvin Kamara, not guaranteed to return this week. Of course, we're going to have to see. But again, the way this sounds, like we may not see him at all. I mean, possibly rest of the season, at least the next couple of weeks. They're going to be careful with him. There's no reason to rush him back. So Devin Neal will still get all the carries. And look, he basically owned this backfield in week 13. You know, the only other running back who got a carry was Evan Hull, who carried 5 times for 15 yards. But in terms of snaps and usage and basically everything, it was all Devin Neal. Like, he was the guy. Now, he wasn't great, but as I mentioned, this wasn't going to be a great spot for him. And he should be better because he gets a decent, not great, a decent matchup against the Bucs this coming week. They're going to need him, but also then you get Carolina, you get the Jets, you get Tennessee. This is why I'm going to talk about a pair of Saints here on the waiver wire because, you know, it's not a dynamic offense, but this is where you can get your value on the wire, and they have a nice schedule. The thing that gives Neal his value really is in a PPR league as a pass catcher. You know, it's not like Kamara was heavily used as a receiver this year, but they need something here, right? They don't have a whole lot of targets, and Neal hasn't been used as a pass catcher, at least as much as Kamara was. 3 catches for 22 yards this past week. The week before, 5 catches for 43 yards. He gives you a floor. Again, this is not a guy who's going to have a breakout kind of game. I can't say that he still excites me, but he does have some value. Now, a guy who is a little bit more exciting, you saw he made some plays on Sunday, was Devon Vele of the Saints, leading receiver for New Orleans. Like, we knew Chris Olave had some back spasm issues, and that might limit him, but he was out there all game. He played, he made, you know, some catches, scored a touchdown. So this wasn't just about Olave being injured. This was about Vele being a part of this passing offense. This is why I recommended Devon Vele several weeks ago, actually before the trade deadline, because we all figured Rashid Shaheed was on his way out, right? Well, he's gone, and Vele is doing exactly what they were hoping for when they, remember, traded to get him. They actually traded a draft pick to Denver to get Devon Vele, and now it's paying off. Vele has a connection with Tyler Shuck. Didn't happen with Rattler, and now it is happening. And remember, this is the Saints coming off a bye, making a point these last couple of weeks to get Vele the ball. Look, the biggest play he made in this game wasn't even as a receiver. It was that onside kick recovery, and almost led them to come back and win. But also that highlight touchdown you saw in the back of the end zone, a really nice grab. But he just kept making plays over and over again. As I said, led the team over Chris Olave, over tight end Juwan Johnson. He led the Saints this week with 8 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown. And he caught everything that was thrown his way. So, new quarterback Tyler Shuck clearly has trust in Vele and will continue to target him. Now, don't look now, but Adonai Mitchell actually caught most of what was thrown his way from old quarterback Tyrod Taylor. Yeah, just when John Mechie had stepped up last week, looked like he was the number 1 guy there. No, it was clearly A.D. Mitchell this week, by far the leading target for the Jets with 12 targets, and he caught 8 of them. I mean, just right there, a little mini celebration, right? Good for you, putting your hands on the ball. We always knew you could do it. But seriously, though, A.D. Mitchell, I mean, he had that long touchdown. He was left wide open, right? The defender fell. It wasn't just that one play. Again, 8 catches, 102 yards. He was clearly getting targeted over and over again by Tyrod Taylor, and this could just continue. We know the talent is there. We've never had a question about the talent, and now they got the situation, the perfect opportunity to be the number 1 receiver on a team that doesn't have a clear number 1 receiver. If A.D. Mitchell can continue doing anything close to this, absolutely you could throw him in your flex. Now let's get back to the running back position. Really hard to find any use there on the waiver wire in a lot of your leagues, but this is why you go for a guy who just needs that opportunity. Blake Corum is getting it even without a Kyren injury. Now, Kyren Williams did leave briefly during the game against Carolina, but he came back, he even scored. And so you look at Kyren's final stat line, you're probably not too worried. Chris obviously broke this down on the panic video, whether you should worry about Kyren or not, but maybe you should a little bit, at least the fact that Blake Corum looked really good this game. He went for 81 yards and a touchdown on just 7 carries. Now, that's not a huge number, right? That's 7 carries, and he's hovered just below, right, the double-digit mark here last couple weeks, 7, 8, 7. Before that, I remember Kyren owners were panicked straight up because we were seeing Blake Corum get like 12 carries, and, you know, there was a thought here this might become some sort of a timeshare. It's not that, but even if Corum is the 1B you've seen, just in this role that he's had, he's got enough juice, he's in a great offense, he got a goal line carry and it turned into a touchdown. There's value there, right? There's definitely value there. And of course, what if Kyren does go down for good? I mean, you absolutely need Blake Corum. So this is just one of those players, as I mentioned, with those RB handcuffs. Even if you don't have Kyren Williams, you just stash a guy like this. Even if you don't want to start him, fine, because if something does happen, you absolutely want him now. You don't have to wait and try to fight for him later. A team that unfortunately is battling a bunch of injuries now, Detroit Lions. First it was Sam Laporta, done for the season, and now Amon-Ra St. Brown out, maybe a week or two. So, well, besides JMO, they got to throw it to somebody, and it could be rookie Isaac TeSlaa. Yeah, if you were watching on Turkey Day, then you saw TeSlaa go electric and catch that touchdown. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Well, look, he only got a couple of catches, right? One of them happened to be a touchdown. We've seen that, but he's going to need to get some more targets here because, again, with those injuries, he's a big body receiver, clearly a red zone, end zone threat, but he could be more than that. We heard this guy drew rave reviews all preseason, and now he's going to get his shot. The thing, too, is this coming week, again, you need to fill in for Sun God or somebody else who's on bye. I mean, look, you could throw TeSlaa out there because get the Cowboys. And despite the improvement, despite the trades, and yes, the Cowboys defense hasn't been nearly as bad as it was early in the season because that's almost impossible, but they still haven't been great, right? Let's not kid ourselves. It's not all of a sudden a shutdown defense, right? Just because they added a couple of players here. Over the past month, they are still bottom 10 in terms of giving up fantasy points to wide receivers. They allow the third most yards per target. And so I don't expect TeSlaa to get a ton of targets. He'll get enough that he could definitely be worth a flex spot. And if you're still playing the streaming game at tight end and or quarterback, all right, let's see if you have any interest in Darren Waller. You probably should. Now, Darren Waller finally made his return. We weren't ever completely sure if he was actually going to make it through this game unscathed. He did. Now, he didn't score a touchdown, and this is the thing with Waller. You remember early in the season, he took his time kind of making his season debut / comeback. But when he did, I mean, he was impactful, at least as far as tight ends go. 4 touchdowns in 3 games. And then he got hurt. Well, now he's back, and so he didn't score a touchdown in this game against the Saints, but 2 catches for 47 yards. I mean, look, that's not great, but yet somehow it was the best on the Dolphins. That's right, a team high, 47 yards. It tells you about the state of the Dolphins offense. It's not great, but because of that, Darren Waller is going to be one of their leading receivers going forward. So he's going to be better than almost any other streaming option you have at tight end. He does, of course, have that touchdown upside. So you need a tight end, get Waller. And then at the quarterback position, I've always been reluctant to be too optimistic about Trevor Lawrence because he always seems to be one of these guys that will put up a bunch of points in random games or he'll do it in garbage time, but he's just not been consistent, right? He's not a guy who really has been able to deliver until now. Now look, Liam Cohen absolutely deserves consideration for Coach of the Year. He's done a great job with what he's been given. I mean, he's turned this into a playoff team, but also a consistent offense. Now with that, the fact also this defense has been fairly good. You're not seeing these boom games for T-Law, right? You're not seeing the garbage time, right? You're not seeing a lot of 300 plus yard games here. But we are seeing he's taken off a little bit more. He's running, but especially near the goal line, he's run in for a few touchdowns. 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. And over the past month, he's had at least 5 carries in every game. That doesn't make him Jalen Hurts, right? He's not the new Lamar Jackson, although he's been better than Lamar Jackson lately. But look, this at least gives a little extra something to his game to offset the big passing yardage. And so, look, Trevor Lawrence has just been consistent, a high floor option, and maybe that's all you need at quarterback these days because there are plenty of worse options that you could go for at QB on the waiver wire. He is a top 15 fantasy quarterback on the season, so just on the fringe of being a QB1. If you can get that off waivers and put in your lineup, why not do that? And let me just go back to what I said before when talking about Jacoby Myers. This Jacksonville schedule should be favorable for him at least. He should have to throw it plenty against the Colts when they face them twice over the next month. Get the Jets. The only week I don't want to start him, I know, is when they play Denver on the road in week 16. So other than that, you could probably pretty much set T-Law at your QB position the rest of the season, except for that 1 week. All right, that's what I got for you week 14. Go out and make those smart moves, be proactive, and always check to see what you can do to improve your team. Do not just sit back and wait for the postseason to happen. You make it happen. And of course, you need to make your smart start-sit decisions. Remember, we got you covered up until the entire end of the season. So check out this week's playlist to help you win.